Hey there, sorry about that. I had one more button to press, and so I could not get on until now. So, this live stream is all about hypoglycemia and the subsequent hormone imbalance that happens when you have this piece of hair, unbalanced blood sugar. Oh my goodness, this is gonna bug me. Oh my word. I can't see which side it's on. Okay. So hopefully this is actually connecting to the group. Let me check Facebook here, make sure we're in the right spot. If you're watching, please say hi so I know you're there. Let me know if you can hear me. I can see. There I am. Okay. I'm really hoping that the notifications actually go to those of you who signed up for this training. So I had a question come in about hypoglycemia and weight gain. Let me see if I can actually find the actual exact question, which is always nice to have a specific question related to a specific issue and a specific person. All right. So the question that came in was this. One of my struggles is as I've edged near 50, there's an issue keeping my blood sugar regulated due to hypoglycemia. If I don't have some sort of carb, even though she's opting for the whole food, healthiest carbs, she'll get the shakes, nausea, dizziness, and chills. So weight is going on her tummy, thighs, and hips, and this is an ongoing thing. Okay, so this is exactly what happened to me. So here she is. She's eating a natural whole foods diet, and she's having hypoglycemia symptoms and has to keep eating carbohydrates in order to not experience that sensation. So that puts you in a place where you're constantly having to eat, right? So a lot of people don't realize that the reason why they struggle with their weight is because they have hypoglycemia, which is something that is on the scale of insulin resistance, right? So what happens is you go from hypoglycemia, this is like a pre-diabetic state, to now having pre-diabetes, to then being officially diagnosed as diabetic, and then moving on to other metabolic diseases, right? So once a person has diabetes, then they're more likely to have cancer, heart disease, fatty liver, high blood pressure, hypertension. So this is like, the spectrum. So we don't one day have perfect blood sugar and the next day we wake up with diabetes. It's something that happens over time. So this is very common, and it pretty much happens as we age to a certain degree because of a lack of muscle tissue. So muscle tissue is there to like a storage place for glucose. Now it's and when I say that, I'm saying that in relationship to her particular issue, being somebody who eats a whole foods diet and is still struggling with hypoglycemia and weight gain despite a whole foods diet. And then as we age, all of us are more susceptible to this because of the reduction in muscle mass as we age. Certain people's nationalities will make a difference as well. So, for example, I'm Métis, and if you are not white, then you have a higher propensity to potentially be more susceptible to insulin resistance and the sequela of that, all those diseases that I mentioned. But of course, we're living in a society where we are bombarded with huge amounts of sugar. So because of these huge amounts of sugar, pretty much everyone who is eating a standard North American diet, and especially plant-based diets as well, which actually the standard North American diet really is a plant-based diet, unless you're just eating junk food all the time. because it's like, we do eat a lot of vegetables. It's not like the majority of the people on the standard North American diet are just eating meat and eggs and cheese all day, right? So plants are high in carbohydrate. Okay, so the majority of people who have trouble with their blood sugar and are overweight, that don't eat whole foods, okay, the beginning step, if that's where you're at, this is not where the lady who wrote in is at. She already eats a whole foods diet, okay? But some people are not even at that stage. A lot of people who are eating the standard North American diet right now and a lot of sugar are going to be able to actually just switch over to a whole foods diet and balance their blood sugar and maybe even normalize their weight, especially if you're like, under 30. That might be all you need to do, is literally just make that change. Like, do not eat concentrated sources of sugar, and it doesn't matter if they're natural or not, and just eat whole foods. And now your problems are solved, because as soon as you switch from those processed foods, you are now replacing them with real food. Real food has all the macronutrients that you need to balance your blood sugar: carbohydrates, fat, and protein. Okay, and fiber. And that will help your blood sugar to balance. And that's what happened to me actually in my early 20s. So I had symptoms of hypoglycemia, and I was a little bit overweight, not very much, but enough at that age that to me it seemed like a lot. And I literally just switched to a whole foods diet. After a couple of years, I lost that extra weight without even trying. And that was eating a high carbohydrate, whole foods, vegetarian diet. Okay, so fast forward to my mid-30s, suddenly that exact same diet has me obese. Okay? What's happened? How did that happen? How that happened is my propensity towards diabetes, in the sense of an insulin resistance, in the sense of having more of like a genetic makeup, but not, when I say genetic, really, I don't mean it in the way that when people tell you, oh, you just have a genetic disease and you're helpless and there's nothing you can do about it. I mean more like a hereditary tendency. Okay, so of course we're going to be susceptible to the same diseases as our ancestors when we also have the same lifestyle, the same diet, and the same mindsets passed down. We're going to have the same hereditary weaknesses where we're susceptible. Okay, so I had that on one level because of partly being Métis, and also my biological father is an insulin injecting diabetic. Okay, so there's a start there, right? Then I made it more likely to become hypoglycemic because I was eating a vegetarian diet. Now, a vegetarian diet is healthy and it's good for cleansing, and to some degree, like it just depends on where you're at. Every single diet has its place, but for me, I was on it for too long. Okay, so 13 years vegetarian, only having cheese, but no, I didn't drink milk, and so cheese and yogurt for 13 years. No meat, no eggs. And so what that means is, if that is happening, part of my diet, there's a large part of my diet that is carbohydrates, and a very small amount that is protein, and a very small amount that is fat. So that's what made me susceptible to the hypoglycemia becoming much more intense, increasing levels of insulin resistance. Okay, so when I was in my 20s, I had symptoms of hypoglycemia. And those symptoms were, I had to, if I missed getting to a meal, I would be very hangry. So if I needed food and I couldn't get it right away, anybody who's in my way or anything that was in my way, I'd go into a state of complete impatience and frustration with everything until I could get food. And that was one of the major things. Another thing about it was I had the tendency to have to eat all the time. So I had to have my 3 meals a day, and then I'd snack in between. So if you tried to take me on a hike in between meals, I couldn't go for very long because I'd had to have taken food with me on the hike. Okay, when people have had hypoglycemia for a long time, they think that's natural and normal. Okay, it is not. Okay, now that I don't have that problem, I can skip meals and I'm never going to experience hypoglycemic symptoms. I might experience genuine hunger, my stomach might growl, but my body's not gonna respond like something bad happened to it because I didn't eat food. Okay, that's a sure sign. Also, I have big pores. Okay, on my nose and in this area. Large pores are another sign of insulin resistance. PMS. So here's the thing is like we talk about hormones and we talk about hormone balance and weight loss, and everybody knows that, you know, hormones have to do with weight loss. And when people's hormones go off, they're more susceptible to weight gain or have trouble losing it, like say, for example, after giving birth. But few realize that actually their PMS or their hormone issues, you know, if it gets even worse and you start to have endocrine system issues, it's just like another pattern, right? It's like hypoglycemia, you start here. If you don't take care of that, you end up with PMS. If you don't take care of that, you end up with like adrenal exhaustion. If you don't take care of that, then you have thyroid issues. If you don't take care of that, then you have like Cushing's or Addison's disease. And, you know, it keeps going if you don't deal with it. So I had, you know, my thing with sugar started when I was in my teens, right? So obviously I didn't eat a whole foods diet my whole entire life. I was like a lot of people who have sugar addiction. In my teens, I ate a lot of sugar and a lot of carbohydrates. So that was the first thing that I did that made me susceptible to this. And then I ended up, of course, because I didn't know how to eat properly. I thought if you want to be thin and healthy, you just have to eat a few vegetables, like, you know, carrots, celery, and lettuce. And that sounded terrible and boring. So I just didn't know much more than that. So I didn't eat properly. Then I ended up with a hormonal imbalance, so the PMS that leads to all sorts of issues like depression, and I remember having other things like paranoia, acne, okay, all those things. And then, like I said, in my early 20s, I started on a whole foods diet and resolved all those issues, okay? But the tendency to have PMS is very vicarious for me, right? Like that's my area of hereditary weakness. So that's how I know I'm out of balance. If I start getting symptoms of hypoglycemia or PMS, then I've gone too far in a direction that doesn't work anymore for my body. So we all have that, right? We have our things. And we need to be grateful, actually, for our symptoms because they keep us in a state of balance, right? Like that's why you have symptoms. When something is not right in your body, I mean, it would be ridiculous for your body not to give you pain, inflammation, and discomfort, because then you would keep doing that thing until you just killed yourself, right? So there's nothing wrong with symptoms. We need to stop thinking our body's broken, there's something wrong with us. We need to go, okay, my body is actually crying out for help, and I need to determine and figure out what is my body trying to tell me, and listen, and then respond. Right? Like if your dog was sick or your fish was sick or something, right? It had symptoms, you'd be looking for ways to solve it. But so many times this mindset that we have in, you know, modern society is that like our body is a machine, and like if there's something wrong with it, we take a drug or we have a surgery, we cut it out. And we never look at the root cause, right? We just try to suppress and ignore it because we don't want to stop and deal with it, because it takes energy to nourish yourself properly. And when you have all these problems, you don't have a lot of energy, right? So it becomes this like cycle of not nourishing yourself because you don't have the energy, and then things get worse, and then it gets harder and harder to muster up the energy to heal yourself. And it's really all about healing yourself, right? Like no one can do this for you. You have to assume responsibility for your health. Janice says your body is the barometer of your truth. Nice. Your body speaks your mind. Right? It's a reflection of your emotions. That's another aspect to diabetes in particular, is the connection to grief held in your body. Okay, so there's multiple reasons why your body will go off balance, and it's not just physical stuff. Like it can be energetic things, emotional things There's a lot of work out there on the metaphysical causes of disease, and it's a great idea to, anytime you have a symptom, not just look at, what you can do to alleviate that symptom or even to heal it at the root cause physically through diet, lifestyle, but also looking at what could be the mindset or the emotional thing that's connected to this problem, and actually do the work on that. Look at that area of your life. So basically, this hypoglycemia that I had in my early 20s, even though I was already a health nut, I was a vegetarian, and I lost weight eating this high carbohydrate diet, and a lot of problems had gone away. I started getting new problems, right? But I kind of ignored, right? Like, because I was like very, very convinced that the vegetarian diet was the perfect diet for all people. And so I wasn't really even willing to look at what are some of the symptoms that I was having. Could that be connected to vegetarianism, right? Because in the beginning, it actually has a healing effect on your body because it cleanses you from the toxic North American lifestyle and diet, right? But it's just, in some cases, we do that for too long. We cleanse for too long. We actually need to build, especially in the childbearing years when you need to build a baby. That is not the best time. A lot of women will get away with it because they have their own nutritional resources that they'll pass on to the baby, but then they'll start to suffer, right? So, for example, one area in my body that quite suffered was my teeth. Started to, basically my whole entire life, I never had any cavities. Then I'd become a vegetarian, and that next year I've got 9 cavities, okay? But I was not willing to look at that time. Maybe I'm not getting what I need, right? Because I was like, this is the perfect diet, and it's healing all these things, and blah, blah, blah. So it heals some things, but then if you do it too long, you're going to have more problems. Different problems, maybe. So I just ignored the hypoglycemia. It just became this, part of my personality. It's like I thought I was just that person that had to eat, had to snack, had to take snacks with me if I was going for any long duration, the hangriness, all those things just felt like me. So there's a lot of people out there who are walking around with hypoglycemia, and they think that that's just them. And they don't realize, here's another one. You have to eat a treat all the time, or you have to eat something sweet, or you have to eat fruit to feel good, okay? That's because you're using the food to balance your blood sugar in the moment. That's why you feel better when you eat sweet. You shouldn't have to. I'm not saying you can't, but you shouldn't have to. If you have to, that's an issue. Nobody has to eat treats or fruit or anything like that. Carbohydrates are not essential. You can actually eat enough protein, and turn that into carbohydrates for your carbohydrate needs if you needed to. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't eat carbohydrates. I'm just saying, in the grand scheme of things, nobody needs carbohydrates. So you don't need a piece of fruit after a meal or in between meals. You don't have to eat fruit. You don't have to eat sweet things at all. But if you do, if you believe that, that is actually coming from an imbalance. There's an imbalance in your body that's giving you what you think is an intuitive eating, that you eat something, it makes you feel better, but it's actually coming from an imbalance, right? Just like if somebody has overgrowth of bad bacteria in their gut, that bacteria is going to say, eat more sugar, right? Because it's what it wants. So it's going to send a message to your brain to create carbohydrates. So many, underlying factors here to why people do what they do, why they overeat. It's never because somebody's lazy or they are undisciplined or whatever it is. We put a lot of different things on ourselves that are just not true. They're driven by physiological, biological imbalances. And if we bring that back into balance, then there's a whole bunch of stuff we don't need to use willpower for anymore, because it just kind of goes away. The cravings go away. Now we have a firm foundation on which to now be able to do other types of work, like mindset work or emotional work. But no amount of psychological work is going to work at all if your body is making you crazy, because it will. Your hormones come from inside your body. Your hormones, your neurotransmitters, they give you feelings. Okay, so you have to put that nutritional foundation in place. Then you start working on the other stuff. So I ignored these hypoglycemia symptoms until I got on the scale and found out that I was 176 pounds on a 5'3" frame, which is obese for my height and body structure. And At first, I honestly still didn't realize it was related at all to like that it was hypoglycemia. So anytime you hear me talking about insulin resistance, I'm saying hypoglycemia, prediabetes, diabetes, heart disease, cancer, fatty liver disease, all those things under the metabolic disease umbrella all fits underneath this insulin resistance. Okay, so because insulin resistance encompasses all those problems, you'll usually just hear me say insulin resistance. You'll rarely hear me talk about hypoglycemia. I'm just talking about it now because it's the focus of this question. But if you have symptoms of hypoglycemia, then you are somebody who is susceptible to insulin resistance and graduating effects of it. So if you don't nip it in the bud now, you're going to have a problem with it later. So what you're basically told when you have hypoglycemia is that in order to balance your blood sugar level, you need to eat carbohydrates. So say your blood sugar is crashing, you're starting to get shaky, your lips and tongue might start getting numb, okay? Or maybe you're just hangry. If you eat something sweet, like if you literally just go get a chocolate bar, you're gonna feel better soon. But you've basically used food to treat the symptom like a drug. You're literally using the carbohydrate like a drug to just kind of balance out a chaotic situation temporarily. But usually what happens is people go for things that are too high in carbohydrate, whether that's refined sugar or a cup of quinoa, which is extremely high in sugar. Okay, it's not sugar like off a teaspoon that you've added to the quinoa. It's carbohydrate when it's broken down in your body and digested. It's sugar, it's glucose. So you're getting about 9 teaspoons of sugar just by having a cup of quinoa. So how are you going to balance your blood sugar levels when you're eating those kinds of foods? You're not going to be able to. What's going to happen is you're going to eat the quinoa and whatever vegetables and stuff on the side, and you're going to feel better for that moment. But then because you ate so much sugar, digestive sugar, in that meal, the 9 teaspoons in the 1 cup of quinoa, plus the teaspoons of sugar that were in the other vegetables that you ate, maybe you had legumes with it. That's another 6 or 7 teaspoons of sugar in that meal, plus the vegetables. Okay, so you might as well just have a Slurpee, right? Like at this point, when you have this problem, you can't use moderation to solve this problem. A person who has healthy and no blood sugar issues can eat quinoa and beans and some vegetables, like a potato even, and nothing's going to happen because they don't have this problem, okay? But if you have this problem, you can't be eating like that because now you're going to spike up your insulin. And when your insulin is high, then now you have to push it down, right? So what happens? Push down too far, and you now have low blood sugar, right? So your body uses insulin to try to push sugar into your cells, and it uses glucagon to put more sugar in your bloodstream. Okay, so you can use it for energy. So what happens is you've eaten so much sugar, and your insulin has tried to push it down, but now it's pushed it down too far, and now your blood sugar's low. So then what's going to happen? You're going to want to eat sugar again because you're going to need to get it back up again and fast so you don't have those symptoms. So it's like this all day. It's called reactive hypoglycemia. You're reacting to what you're eating, basically. Your body's reacting to what you're eating. By the way, what I'm drinking here is a decaf cold brew coffee with coconut cream in it and a little bit of erythritol, and it's really, really good. It's the only way I enjoy coffee with coconut milk, right? Like, it has to be cold coffee. Hot coffee, like, ugh, coconut milk and hot coffee, yuck. But for some reason, it tastes really good in a cold brew. So we don't want to do that. We don't want to just do this thing. We're told, this is what we're told. We're told to eat more fiber and to basically eat your 3 meals and then snack in between, right? Like the 6 small meals a day. Again, that is a strategy to bring some immediate balance to the situation. But it's not hitting at the level of root cause. It's not going to stop the trajectory. It's not going to stop the cycle, right? It's going to actually keep the cycle going. So we have to think underneath that. What do we eat to keep our blood sugar balanced in the first place so that we're not on the cycle? Okay. So then we have to understand the different effect that food has on our hormones. Okay. So insulin is triggered by carbohydrates, and it is hardly at all triggered by carbohydrate or by protein, and pretty much not at all with fats. Okay, so if you want to get off the cycle of hypoglycemia, you're going to have to stop eating concentrated sources of sugar, which are carbohydrates. Stop stimulating insulin all the time. So what you want to do is, first of all, if you're not even a whole foods eater, the first thing you have to do is get off refined sugar. So take that sugar, and unless you're brewing kombucha in your kitchen, you do not need to have any white sugar in your kitchen. If you have this problem, you should never ever be cooking with concentrated sources of sugar. So get it out of your kitchen. Now, a lot of people will do this. They'll just bring in the natural sugars, right? They'll bring in the coconut sugar or the like panela, okay, or maple syrup. Your body does not care if you ate white sugar off the spoon, or a beautiful, delicious whole food spoonful of maple syrup. Your body does not care what the source is, okay? It's still a concentrated source of sugar. So if you have problems with your hormones and insulin resistance, ACA, hypoglycemia, prediabetes, diabetes, hypertension, high blood pressure, heart disease of any kind, fatty liver disease, or cancer, you should not be eating sugar at all. So, has to go. Now, does this mean you're going to have a pleasureless life? No, because we live in this amazing time where we have alternative sweeteners that do not impact your blood sugar level that are on the market. Stevia erythritol, which is fermented sugar, and monk fruit extract. Okay, you can bake with those instead now. So you still get to have your treats, but you're not going to spike your blood sugar. Okay. Of course, grains like wheat are high in carbohydrate. So grains have to come out of your diet. Whole grains even, because they're really high in digestive sugar. Grains, legumes, and starchy vegetables. If you have any of those problems I just mentioned, they have to come out of your diet for you to get the inflammation down and balance your blood sugar level and start healing. Am I saying that you're going to have to avoid those foods for the rest of your life? No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that in order to bring balance back to your body so that you can heal yourself, you are going to have to eliminate those foods from your diet. So instead, it's not that you don't eat any carbohydrates in the healing process, you do, but you only eat the non-starchy ones and fruit, okay? And keep the fruit in moderation. Preferably lower sugar fruits like berries, for example, or green apples or green kiwis. Okay, and then any non-starchy vegetable that exists is naturally low in sugar. It's naturally high in fiber, which helps to keep your blood sugar balanced. So a lot of people they're telling themselves, oh, I'm gonna eat all this quinoa and legumes, for example, because they're high in fiber, and that's going to help me, whether they're thinking about weight loss or balancing their blood sugar. And theoretically, it makes sense, right? Because there's fiber in there, so it should slow down the absorption of the sugar. But the problem is, those foods are too high in sugar. So that works for a non-starchy vegetable. The fibers in there are going to help you absorb that slowly, keep your blood sugar balanced. But if you're eating something like quinoa with your 9 teaspoons of sugar, all it's going to do is slow down the release of the sugar, so you're constantly having sugar for hours and hours being released. It's like a time-release sugar capsule, okay? So this is why people cannot lose weight when they're eating health foods, because they're way too high in sugar for somebody with a health issue. Okay? So they have to go. So what have we talked about? We've talked about getting rid of concentrated sources of sugar, whether they're white sugar or natural sugar, it doesn't matter. We need to get them out of your diet. The next thing you have to get out of the diet is starchy vegetables, grains, and legumes. Okay. Now, when you're making a treat with your erythritol, stevia, and your monk fruit, but you're still trying to keep the carbohydrate content down by not having the wheat in it, then you just use things like almond flour, coconut flour, for example. You can still have, cakes and cookies and all these things. You just have to learn to cook differently. So even when you get to your ideal weight and when you have healed yourself of these health problems, I recommend that you do not go back ever to eating a high carbohydrate diet. Okay? Because even though, when you were 20, you could eat all those foods, even though they're whole foods and they were healthy for you, then it was fine and you didn't gain weight then. Number one, in order to not gain weight and eat all those foods, you're going to have to restore your muscle mass. So if you're willing to do that, then by all means, then you can gradually increase your carbohydrates. But the reality is that it is actually not natural to eat carbohydrates in high amounts. Now, think of a banana before it was hybridized. It was hardly any of the soft, yummy stuff that you like, and mostly seeds. Right? Nature didn't provide a banana the way we eat a banana now. Or wheat. Imagine if you had to go into the field and pick each wheat berry and then grind it to make a flour to then make your sourdough bread. How much bread would you be eating? Right? Like, you might think of that as a once a week thing on the weekends or something like that. You're going to make a loaf of bread because bread is so yummy. A lot of our issues with overeating carbohydrates come from the industrialized food complex. It's like literally put in front of us, we can't help ourselves, right? Because it just tastes so good and it makes us feel good. Because that sugar stimulates we get the serotonin hit from it, right? Same with coffee, for example. And we feel good in the moment. But if we don't have the level of health to be able to tolerate that, then we're going to have a crash and not feel very good in the future, especially as we get more inflammation and then end up with these chronic health diseases. Or health issues. So get rid of the sugar. All concentrated sources of sugar need to go. Get rid of the starches. Okay. Now think about, so we know what to get rid of. Okay. Now we need to think about what to put in. So one of the reasons why people do eat too many carbohydrates is because they don't eat enough protein and they don't eat enough fat. Okay. So when a person is eating a high carbohydrate diet, all the protein and fat that they need is being displaced by the carbohydrates. And the more carbohydrates a person eats, the more they want carbohydrates, which will displace the fat and the protein even more. And fat and protein are the balancing macronutrients that will stop this reactive hypoglycemia cycle of needing to eat sugar to stop your blood sugar from crashing. So we now want to displace those carbohydrates, those starchy carbohydrates and the sugar, and the legumes, the grains, the vegetables like yams and potatoes. We want to eat less or none of that until, everyone's different. Like, I don't know how much on an individual level your body can tolerate and what you should be eating or not be eating because you're an individual, okay? I'm always talking, I'm talking about the one-size-fits-all approach because I can't talk to just one person, right? Unless I'm in a private session with them and be able to look at their unique situation. So there's a certain amount of carbohydrates that people can tolerate and still maintain their health and maintain their weight, okay? And that's different for everyone. But if you do a healing diet, right? If you do a really good cleanse and you eat this natural whole foods way and keep the carbohydrate amount low, then you're going to be able to determine when you introduce maybe a higher carbohydrate food, see how it works in your body, see how often you can eat a potato, right? Or how often you can eat wheat, for example. Maybe it's only twice a week. And at that, you maintain your health and you maintain your weight and you're happy, okay? But it would suit all of our health for continuing in just the future to prevent disease as well and to just maintain optimal levels of health to make a shift to a lower carbohydrate lifestyle. The reason a 20-year-old can eat this, say a vegan diet or a standard North American diet and be thin is because they have different hormones than a 40-year-old, and they also have more muscle mass than a 40-year-old. Okay, so you're going to have to do a lot of extra work than the average person if you want to be able to do that, right? Like, if you're just going to be like the average person and let your body go, which is what most people in society do, and they eat this on the standard North American and high carb diet, you are not going to be able to maintain your weight or health on that same diet. So I think it would be ideal for each person, no matter what, even if you're watching this and you are at a perfect weight, if you don't want to go down this road in the future, then just change it over. Get the sugar out of your cupboards. Get those those sweeteners in that I mentioned that don't cause your blood sugar to crash or spike. Get in the almond flours and all those things. When you're baking, use those instead. Minimize the starches, right? Like, that would be what nature would more be like, right? You just wouldn't be eating bread if it was a few hundred years ago and you had to pick it yourself, pick the wheat berries yourself and grind them. So I think nature shows us that it's the non-starchy vegetables and if you just have to go walk in the forest right now, you're not going to find a lot of starchy vegetables to eat, right? Like, even the roots they're just woody and fibery. So I think nature tells us that just in general, we're not supposed to be eating a ton of carbohydrates, okay? Other than in season, right? In the summer, when it's fruit time, right? Then there's a abundance, depending on where you live, okay? So there's all those factors as well. Is, where do you live on the planet? What season are you in? Those kinds of things to consider. But if you now look at displacing the carbohydrates with protein and fat and fiber, so when you formulate a meal, you make sure you get enough protein in your meal. 30 grams of protein per meal. 20 grams minimum, okay? But if you're trying to optimize your health, go for 30 grams of protein in your meal. Then fill the rest of the plate with non-starchy vegetables. There's your carbohydrates. You don't need to count them, okay? Eventually, you don't need to count your proteins either, because you'll start to know how much is 30 grams. Like a chicken breast, for example, would be 30 grams of protein. Then fill your plate with non-starchy vegetables. People don't get fat on non-starchy vegetables, and they don't spike their blood sugar on non-starchy vegetables, and they don't overeat them. They're not concentrated in sugar, so they don't create that blood sugar spike and then drop that cause you to crave more, like a potato would, right? Or a piece of bread would. Because you're adding non-starchy vegetables to your meals, you are automatically having the fiber, right? And then you just put a dollop of a good quality fat on there. So whether it's you cooked your vegetables in some MCT oil or coconut oil or butter or ghee, or you're drizzling some fat on after, like if you're eating a salad, you're adding some raw dressing like an olive oil or a flax. It's just how much fat you should put on that meal is not a one-size-fits-all thing either. It's how much fat can your body digest, right? Because if you've been on a low-fat diet for a long time, or you've been vegan for a long time, and now you start putting all this fat on your food, you're not gonna be able to digest it. Then you're gonna get like gallbladder symptoms and feel gross. So just as much as you can digest, and then try to increase that, because if you get an optimal amount of protein and fat, you're not gonna crave carbohydrates. Also, you want to put some cultured foods on your plate. So that would be sauerkraut, or Bubby's pickles. If you're scared of sauerkraut, just try Bubby's pickles first. It's like a brand of pickles that is fermented instead of canned. Drinking drinks like kombucha and kefir and yogurt and kefir milk. These are sources of probiotics. Get the probiotics in your diet. Those probiotics are going to feed your gut flora so that you're going to start producing more and more good bacteria. You're going to have less bad bacteria. Then you're going to have less cravings. You're also going to have better digestion. You're going to absorb more nutrition from your food. Okay, there's also nutrients that contribute to hypoglycemia and insulin resistance, right? So you need to have the chromium, for example. But if you're not eating a whole foods diet, if you're eating a lot of processed foods, then where are you getting these nutrients that you need that are important for blood sugar balance? Lisa says, listening to you, my daughter is visiting and said, "Is that you talking, Mom?" LOL, she says we sound exactly like Sherry. Aw, that's cute, Lisa. I love that. I once had a client who said that she's putting her baby to sleep, listening to my audios, and her baby would kind of perk up, like he recognized my voice and would be soothed by these audios. I love hearing stuff like that. I just think it's really cute when little kids connect in with healing and health topics. It's very sweet. So yeah, you'll displace those carbohydrates by actually getting the right amount of protein and fat in your meals and sticking to the non-starchy vegetables. Then we have to talk about snacks, right? So start off with just thinking when you're putting a plate together: protein, non-starchy vegetables, and some fat. Okay, for some of you it'll just be the fat you cook the vegetables in. You might not add any more, but you could add mayonnaise for some fat. You could add some creme fraiche, some sour cream, whatever. Depends on how much you can digest. But you're going to experience satiation, okay? And you're going to feel so good and so deeply nourished, and you're going to start to get yourself off the cycle of the reactive hypoglycemia. But when you have this problem for a while, it's not going to necessarily change at the next meal. But I mean, I've had people who have been literally diagnosed as diabetic, had their blood sugar completely go back to normal in 3 days, okay, eating this way. So the next part of it is that you may still need to snack because, this is a process of getting to that balance. So if you need to snack, we're not going to have any carbohydrates at snack time. Okay, so we're not going to have fruit. Keep your fruit at breakfast, okay? You keep your vegetables to lunch and supper. In between meals, the foods that you should be eating, if you have to snack, you don't have to snack, okay? But if you feel like you have to snack, they should be high protein or high fat foods, okay? So how I got myself off the cycle, and I didn't even think of myself as somebody who ate sugar, because I was somebody who, like, if I was to eat something, that was a treat, I would want to go for something like chips. But at that point, I didn't know that chips, because they're from potatoes, like, I didn't know potatoes were high in sugar, okay? So here I think, oh, I'm better. I don't eat so much sugar. I'm not one of those people who crave sweet things all the time. Chips are sugar, okay? So don't think just because they're salty that they're not sugar. They are sugar. So what helped me was when I would have cravings or want to eat in between meals, I would eat fat bombs, okay? So all you have to do is Google keto fat bombs. There'll be a gazillion different recipes on the internet. These are things you can snack on in between meals that are going to be sweetened with those natural sweeteners I mentioned, erythritol, stevia, and monk fruit. And they're going to be in a base of something like coconut oil or cream cheese, okay? They are going to satiate you. You cannot binge on these foods, right? Like, I make a tray of Nanaimo bars that are like a fat bomb version, which is like pretty much just fat. It's got cocoa and some desiccated coconut in it, but otherwise it's just butter, right? And coconut oil with cocoa. Tastes amazing, tastes exactly like your regular Nanaimo bar, but I can't binge on it because it's all fat practically, right? Now, if you took me to Safeway or something and gave me a box of pre-made Nanaimo bars that are made the normal way, I would want to eat the whole thing, because when you eat sugar, it makes you want to keep eating more sugar, and there's no fat in there or minimal fat, so it's not satiating you. You don't stop, right? So that's just it. You just make that switch. Just decide. At meals, I eat a balanced meal of protein, fiber, and fat. And at snack time, I eat protein-rich foods or fat-rich foods, okay? So the fat-rich foods could also be like, say, avocado. You can throw some sauerkraut on top of that avocado, because fermented vegetables, the beneficial bacteria have actually eaten the sugar out of them. So it doesn't matter. You can eat those in between meals. And please put them on, as many meals as you can, because besides what I mentioned about the cravings, when you restore your gut flora, you will be restoring your metabolism, and they have done research that has shown that obese people have totally different flora than people who are have a normal weight. So you need to restore that gut flora. Um, and so like olives, for example, would be a nice high fat snack in between meals. Um, and then on the protein side, you can do things like your like a what are those called? Those beef jerky sticks, preferably grass fed if you can get them. Any kind of meat treat is going to be higher protein. It's hard to get vegetarian sources, unfortunately, right? Like you could have a protein powder if you want. Not very satiating though, of course, right? It's not an actual food source. But that is just kind of the way it is. It's not that easy to have a high protein vegetable based food that is going to satiate you and be not also high in carbohydrates, right? Like for example, I guess one might be good would be something like peanut butter or almond butter. Those are nice things. You could put those on something really low carbohydrate like a celery stick, for example, would be a nice treat. Let's see what else. It's hard for me to think of it off the top of my head because, to be honest with you, because my blood sugar is balanced now, I don't have to snack all the time, so I'm not obsessed with snacking. I pretty much just eat at my meals. My time of the day where I'd be more likely to want to snack is an evening thing, right? So then I would usually make myself a treat of some sort, or eat a piece of cheese, right? Because there's an example: high protein, high fat, and pretty low carb. Okay. But it's actually easy, okay? Because you don't have to give up the sweet, rich, creamy comfort foods that you love. You just need to make them differently. You need to just formulate your meals differently, and you need to snack differently. But it's not like it's not as good. It's as good as probably what you're doing now, or better. You just have to make the right choices, choose the right ingredients to make those foods. And you don't have to give up your pleasure, and you're actually eating healthier, and you're getting to your ideal weight at the same time. So I think that is everything that I wanted to cover today, and that's basically what I did to go, lose like how many dress sizes. I was a size 16 down to at my smallest a size 4. Just doing that. It didn't do anything. It's nothing special. It's just that's if you eat for your hormones and you eat for your blood sugar, you're automatically going to go down to your ideal weight without having to do anything. You don't have to exercise or anything like that. But if you do want to restore your ability to digest carbohydrates and assimilate them in a way that's not going to throw off your blood sugar level, then you are going to have to heal your gut, and you're going to have to restore your muscle mass. Okay, so you're going to have the muscle mass you had at 20 if you're going to eat the way you ate at 20. So it's not impossible. It's just, you just have to make a decision about it. What kind of person are you going to be? Do you want to have to lift weights and exercise so that you can have more carbohydrates, or would you prefer to do what I've done in the past, which is to just change everything that I already eat over into a low carbohydrate food and emphasize eating more fats and protein in my diet instead? And that's easier. Okay. But that's not to say that I don't advocate for restoring your muscle mass. It's just that I'm personally not there yet. So I basically feel like I can't really speak to that because I don't have that muscle mass that I would like to have, that I had at my 20s. But that's my next level. That's where I'm going in my life, right? Like I'm like thin, but I feel more like that skinny fat. I'm not toned, right? And that's, taking it to the next level. So, first of all, focus on your diet. And, I've been able to maintain this since I was 36 is when I woke up obese on my plant-based whole foods diet, and I'm going to be 45 on the 18th. So that's 9 years of eating this way. It's totally doable, and it's better than how I ate before. And do you know how amazing it feels to be able to skip a meal and not have all those annoying symptoms and having to be that person? It's awful. I didn't like that. It's just what I was used to, and I don't want to ever have that again. So there's no way I'm going to go back to eating a high carbohydrate diet for any reason. Anita says, I need to be more intentional about including more fat. It's just not reflex yet for me to think about it. Yeah, and make sure that along with that you if you're increasing your fat, then bring your carbohydrates down. Thank you. She says, happy almost birthday. Because a lot of mistakes that people make is they actually just up their fat, but they don't bring the carbohydrates down. And guess what? They actually gain weight, because that's the recipe for gaining weight. Increase your fat and your carbohydrates at the same time, so that everything you eat gets turned to fat. Okay? Because if you're stimulating insulin, everything you eat while your insulin is elevated is going to be instructed to be put into your fat cells. So this is one of the problems with the like ketogenic focus, is that a lot of people think they're doing a ketogenic diet, and all they're doing really is increasing their fat, right? So one day I was at the checkout and I saw an overweight person come to the checkout with a keto pudding, right? So it was like a high fat pudding, no sugar. It was like, or sorry, mousse, and it had like, it's high fat and no sugar. But then she also had a bag of chips. She would actually gain more weight doing that than if she just ate a normal thing of pudding and a normal thing of, or just like chips and a normal high sugar pudding, right? So, that's one of the issues, is incorporating more fats without bringing the carbohydrates down. The carbohydrates just have to come down. End of story. There's just no way about it. And I mean, I can't get into it. I actually need to go soon. But there's a diet that works for everyone. You know that you've heard of people who just eat carbohydrates, okay, and who've lost weight. Okay, so it's not just about one way is the right way. It's like, where is your body at right now? Okay, so the people who are doing those high carbohydrate diets and getting results, guess what they're not eating? They're not eating any fat. Okay, they're not eating high carb and high fat. Okay, it's kind of like you have to choose one direction or the other. If you're somebody who needs to cleanse, it would actually benefit you to temporarily go on a raw vegan diet and hardly eat any fat at all, other than like what's in like, the raw food recipe itself. But only for so long, okay? If you have like a lot of toxicity, that will help to eliminate that toxicity. But it's not a sustainable diet for forever. So, because you will end up with other deficiencies. Ideally, we're trying to get to that place where we have a moderate diet, where we can eat everything in moderation. But if you're already out of balance, moderation is never going to get you to your ideal place. You're going to have to do something extreme. So whether that's a low carbohydrate, high fat diet, or a high carbohydrate diet, no fat diet, it just depends on where you're at. Test it out. Okay, but make sure if you do something that is no fat in your diet, make sure you still take in essential fatty acid supplements, because your skin will dry out. And again, that's a sign that you're deficient. So when a person has certain, like your imbalance has gone so far that now it's not just PMS and hypoglycemia anymore, but you've got endocrine issues, you've got thyroid issues, problems with your cortisol, adrenal, autoimmune diseases, etc. Sometimes going on a cleansing diet like that with no fat can actually, and low protein, can actually make that condition worse. Those conditions worse because you're already in a state of deficiency, right? So you have to figure out where to start based on where you're at, right? There's no, one way to do things. Okay, so, but to me, my perspective, and based on my experience as a practitioner and my experience in my own health and my own body and all the different cleanses and things that I've done, and different diets, I have found that a vegetarian or vegan diet is a cleansing diet. It's not ideal to be permanent. And that ideally what you want to do is just maximize the amount of protein that you eat. Make sure that you get that, because honestly, that is what usually women don't do. It's easy for us to like manage our carbs. It's easy for us to, unless you have a sugar addiction, I know it's not easy for you. It's easier for us to, add the fat, but it's harder to get the protein. That is harder. And as we age, the protein becomes even more important for balancing our hormones and things like that. So a lot of us, especially if we have had children, okay, we've birthed babies, don't really need cleansing. We actually need building. So it's going to be better for us to, when it comes to weight loss, to eat a more building diet. Okay, so I've sort of combined a deep cleanse with a building diet in my Delish Diet Deep Cleanse program, which you can see at my website, which is www.delishdiet.ca. That's a more, it's a cleansing diet, but it has all those building components, so that if you already have like deep deficiency, it's not going to make your situation worse. And then I have more intensive cleanses that I do myself and with my private clients that are more, a lot more difficult, and they're actually vegan, and they don't have any saturated fat in them from animals. It's only coconut, and they're harder to do, but they elicit really good results because your body is literally put into a deep cleansing mode. But it's, again, not great for people with extreme endocrine or any endocrine problems, or things like when you're premenstrual, for example. Your body doesn't want to be cleansing necessarily. It's your body. As a woman, unless you've hit menopause, every single month your body wants to get you ready to have a baby. So if you do something extreme that's low in fat or low in protein, then your body is worried, and you start to go into holding patterns and a famine kind of mode. Because your body wants to get you, have all these building nutrition. The building nutrition is from the fat and the protein, so that you can house a baby, right? If you are, past menopause, you'll be able to tolerate the, say, more plant-based diet better once you've already established a good foundation of optimal nutrition. But if you're already deficient and then you start doing these cleansing diets that are too cleansing, you can make your situation worse and not get the results you want, because your body it'll start reacting to it like a calorie restricted diet. And then you'll go, you'll start either not being able to lose any weight, not getting the benefits of the cleanse. Like this happens with fasting as well with women. You don't get the benefits because your body starts to freak out, thinks it's starving. So you're not going to be healing in starving mode. Okay, if you're starving, there'll be no healing mode. So you have to find the right diet that supports your body to cleanse and heal at the same time. Okay. All right, well, I have to run here. So if you guys have any questions that come up, feel free to post them in the comments, and I'll come back later and check the replay and answer them. And maybe you'll give me some ideas for upcoming live streams. All right, thanks for watching, and we will see you again. Bye-bye.